Hi. Hello.
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 Hello and welcome to Architecting.
Thanks for coming and talking to me. You just had like a marathon of they put you through the ringer first. You're the first day, and then you're supposed to have a guest, Matthias Del Campo, right, joining you, and then last second you got to do it the whole 3 hours, 4 hours yourself. But I loved it. Very, very
Thank you.
Informative there. So
well, I was going to say that I do usually tell people that there's almost no way to do a presentation on this topic because it's so. I always tell people that it is a mile wide and about an inch thick. So I could do 1,000 slides, and I mean a lot of the things that happened in this session was I answered questions.
right.
But those are all the content that was not in the slides.
Right. And I feel a little bit at a disadvantage because this room wasn't totally set up yet, so I kept having to leave and go, and so I got sort of 3/4 of the talk.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so you came in and gave a sort of synopsis of AI and specifically Midjourney, right? And kind of been really going through the possibilities and where it's at. But that idea of the mild wide and an inch thick is really true, and it's so new, right? Like that was the surprising thing in how you started your talk of talking about Midjourney started a year ago essentially, and how far it's come. And so I think like my first question is just like, you talk about sort of this group of like 5 people in a sense that are kind of these experts or like that you're hanging out with, but how did you get into that, and how did you get to be the sort of expert or where you're at there?
Well, thanks for calling me an expert. I wouldn't say that about myself yet. I think that here's the thing. There's probably only about, let's just be conservative and say about 20 people who can really speak to this. Right now, there's going to be more and more. But the thing that's happening is that where are those 20 people going to go? Matthias has been in a couple places where we've crossed paths like 2 ships in the night, but we haven't been in the same place yet. But we need all of those folks doing it because there's so many questions and so many organizations and companies that are asking questions, and they want to talk about it. They want to have a conversation, but there's no one to talk about it with. So I always like to tell people that it's an interesting environment. It's plenty of room for those 5 folks I talk about, but the other 10 that I don't know. And there's plenty of room for us to all contribute to helping making this conversation important. And also I think someone just recently asked me why I did this, and because I'm an AI member, I'm an architect, I believe in our profession. I saw how CAD was so disruptive in the 80s, and I just wanted to be a part of being an explainer who could help people not be so worried about it, understand that it's just another technology that we can change with, and that if you engage with it, it could make you essentially more powerful in your profession, not eliminate you as a professional.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of fear around it and a lot of sort of unknowns, right? Of not knowing what it can do or what it's going to do. And I was going to ask you about that. I love, I'm inspired by you because, you're not a young man, right? But like you're digging into this very advanced field. And like you said, you have the experience of thinking back to before CAD. And so how does this period sort of at the cusp of AI compare to at the cusp of CAD?
Mm-hmm. Well, firstly, I would say that I feel really fortunate to be in this situation. I sometimes often tell people that I look at the things that my grandmother had seen. So my grandmother was born a couple of years after the Wright brothers.
Oh, wow.
And then she saw the same thing I saw as man land on the moon. So you think about those major events, and then I look at the major events in my life, again, man landing on the moon, some very unfortunate wars, sending a probe to Pluto, things like that are just fantastic. And I really thought, sitting back, I thought, well, that's it. I'm not going to see anything else. Nothing else is going to happen. And then a year ago, something happened. I mean, it literally is almost the most important thing to happen in my entire life experience, even only really second to man landing on the moon. People always ask me my age experience, what was the most important thing, and I say man landing on the moon. There's nothing could top that, really. But this one is actually really close, and it will pass it in some ways because it's still growing. We actually don't know its full potential. So I think we're all in it kind of by a means of opportunity, and I would say that the important issue is that it's based on our training. So most of those people most of the leaders right now all train in architecture, and they have a background in computers or something like that. And so for me, I have a master's degree in web design and new media, which qualifies me as a minor in computer science, more or less. So when this happened, my architectural life and my computer life merged all at once. So when you talk about not being a younger person, I didn't care how old I was. This was the moment that needed to happen. So I'm really grateful that I can have this chance to do it and to help. Really, I see myself as helping people understand a complex problem.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting you say that that right now the architects are at the forefront of pushing this forward for architecture, right? And I think the fear for me, right, is this sort of, I teach it to you as well, so so I see sort of like student trends and things, and there's the trend of sort of Pinteristification of projects, right, of students gathering images and putting it as a project, and the thing you were talking about, right, of Midjourney is the sort of 1 to 20 rule, where you have kind of one good image per every 20, and the idea of good is really intriguing to me, and who chooses what good is, right? Of the idea of a client or whatever doing the 20 images and they choose what they think is good or whatever. And so do you have that good that satisfying definition of what the good architecture is, what you're looking for or striving for, and how that still allows the architect the agency in this process?
Well, I don't think any architect would be comfortable saying something like, I know what good architecture is when I see it.
This is going to crack it. Hot take, yeah.
I always just tell people to just rely on your training. It's actually really true. I've spent 30 years working in firms. I was basically the lead designer in several of them, design principal in several of them. I've designed a couple of really good buildings I'm really proud of. And I teach design, and in many ways, I think I've been a really good mentor to young students in the design realm. And so obviously in my role as a teacher and a critic, I mean, it's my job to really engage that in special ways. So it's interesting. I almost have to ask myself that question, even when you look at those 20 images.
Right.
How did I pick that one?
Right.
And it talks a lot about yourself, your personality of yourself, your life experience and how it affects your decisions. And how do you define excellence? And I mean, I think it's not, what I'm saying is that, well, if you hang around long enough, it's more than that. You have to appreciate a sense of the principles of design is what I tell my students. I mean, the principles of design are the principles of design, whether it's fashion or art or graphic art or car design. I mean, they're all the same. And if you believe in those principles and you look for them, you aspire yourself to do it, and you begin to have a better feel to recognize it. And so I would say it's not an answer, it's a process, really. It's more like a process that it takes to kind of do something like that.
Right. And I guess it's that tenacity of intention, right? Where you were talking about this sort of hybrid process of Mid-Journey to then to Photoshop to then back to Mid-Journey, and where you still have that vision and that tenacity to get it there, and you're not just taking what the program gives you on the first of 20 or whatever. And I like, what did you say when somebody asked you about something, I don't know, is it going to take my job or something? And you're like, well, there's bad architects or bad architects, and it's not going to be helpful or not, right? And I think, that's where, for me, the heartburn comes of wanting to make sure that there's meaning and depth to architecture, and this allowing a tool to create very stunning images that don't have that pass as that. But bad architects can still do good renderings, but
I think it's many of the questions people ask today like that are a lot of it's speculation, and that's why I try to characterize, well, this is my opinion on this one, because it's, nobody really knows. Nobody knows what kind of architecture is going to really come from this, because like I said, I just can't call someone else and say, hey, show me a project you just finished using AI, because there probably is zero people that in this whole country that has gone that far, but there's close. There are people working on it.
Right.
I know Zaha Hadid office, they talk about that a lot. They're using AI to do the kind of architecture they were already doing.
Right.
So it's in progress.
They can just type in Zaha Hadid architecture into the thing.
Well, hopefully not.
Yeah,
but,
right.
I think I've done some experimentations with that, and I try to stay away from it, but I do want to see what happens when it happens. But I do tell my students that they don't need to do that, because I believe in their creativity is much more powerful, and that I want to see the Joe Smith style. I don't want to see, like I talked about specific architects, and there's nothing to learn when you do something like that. And I think it's sort of like the part I was talking about, using magical words inside of prompts, where you discuss something that is totally unrelevant or irrelevant to the thread of the thought that you're trying to go for. Sort of like I said, I was working on something doing below water surface vehicles, call it, and use the word submarine. It's obvious you're going to use a word like that, and you put in a bunch of other words. If you're not careful, it'll be yellow submarine, which, so that'll happen. But I put in the word telescope, a completely unrelated word, and actually it transformed the model into something really powerful. And it actually was able to help the model create the big lenses that those vehicles have, that so you can see out. And it tried to merge a telescope with a submarine. And so I find those experiences really gratifying and very enjoyable. And when I post them, people start asking me all kinds of questions when I have this. But
those productive accidents,
that
I strive for in a normal architecture process, right? Of trying to set up that process where you don't know where it's going, and something breaks and it's better off, right? And this is like a more robust tool, I guess, for that.
Yeah, every designer is different, and I couldn't even begin to think about. I've worked with a lot of designers. I've been manager of a lot of design situations, and every person I've worked with is different, and you don't know what what the process you present to them, and hope they follow the process, but you don't really know what their own internal process is. And they can try to articulate it to you, but they might not do that. So for somebody like that to use a tool like this, it's going to change that relationship. Now, I mentioned in the lecture today about how someone in a team of designers could not do AI in the office, but go home and do it.
Right. Yeah.
And then bring that drawing back to the office and say, this is what I was working on yesterday. And no one would know the difference, really. Especially as the one person asked me this question, I said, well, this is part of the answer of two questions. One was, hey, I sketch over those. But sketching is a really powerful historical way of doing architecture. Some schools of architecture still teach that intensely. So But I had never actually thought of it that way. But actually, just think about the bridge that creates from the past to the present, like traditional methodology with future methodology actually clashing together in a very interesting way. So I told her there's nothing stopping you from even being part of the team, and you can't do AI. She said you can't do AI in the office. So I said, okay, hey, take that home, sketch over, talk, and then bring the sketch back to work. And then talk just like you normally talk to them about a sketch you just did.
Right.
And in the situation like that, which I call low stakes engagement, you don't have to disclose that because it's a sketch now. It's not the actual picture. So the interesting thing is you just can't bring the picture in and say, but that's just for now. I mean, 5 years from now, that might be just the norm. Go home. I need you all to go home and come back with your 5 best text-to-image results. And that's going to happen eventually as well.
Right. That is interesting. The amount of looking around during your presentation, and you were very generous in your presentation and giving all these prompts and showing what they created, and seeing a lot of these, I'm assuming, older principals of firms just taking pictures of everyone, right?
Oh,
it almost gives agency back to those principals who have aged out of the programs and they don't know anymore. And if you can get to text to image and they're saying, here's my sketch and it's rendered, maybe that's good, maybe not, but
it's a really good question about we'll call it generations, how generations deal with technology. And not as a counter to that, but the point generally has been that generations separate when something new happens. This is actually a little different. You're kind of pointing that out. This is spreading out through all generations. So everyone's going to find a place in this somewhere. And when CAD happened, you asked me about that earlier, when CAD happened, it was very generational split. So the youngest people in the office were asked to do this. And like I said, I mentioned before, we were on a night shift. So that was kind of how it went down. And I have to be honest, I met a few people of an older generation of that era who were very upset about that scenario. Either they wanted to engage or they didn't want to engage at all. They thought it was not traditional, so they stayed away from it. This is, I think, going to be a little different, because even if you just think about AI chatbots, it's for everybody.
Right.
I mean, anybody can ask any question, you want. I mean, you just might want to say, hey, I'm going to this vacation spot. Where's the best place to eat dinner? You could ask that question, and it will give you a really interesting answer.
Yeah. Well, I thank you for coming and for filling in, and it was an excellent talk, and just the sort of generosity of information that you've gathered over this quick year here. So
absolutely.
Welcome to Colorado, and glad you got that liquid IV in, so you're able to recover enough. And
that's some really potent, good stuff, and I appreciate they were thinking about me. But this isn't my first time to 9,000 feet, and we'll just say it won't be my last.
Nice. Well, yeah. Thanks for coming.
All right, thank you. It's a pleasure. Yep.
You can visit architecting.com, that's architect-ing.com, to see images from this week's guest.
And please rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts.
Have a great week and keep connecting.